BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, your small but perfectly sized daily dose of news, insight and analysis. It's Friday the 22nd of December. I'm Amy Canavan, and coming up today...
Football is not for sale and nothing, absolutely nothing can change that.
European Super League is making headlines again, but what does it mean for Scottish football? Also...
Here's Penrice, oh, it's turned in! Curtis Guthrie stuns Pittodrie and ends Livingston's barren run in front of goal.
Can Bottom Club Livy pull off a shock at Celtic Park? And...
Up we step the Rangers captain, low into the right-hand corner of Dimitar Mitov's net.
We'll preview the weekend's other key games, including a tricky-looking away game for Rangers and a crucial match in the battle for third.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
All that and more to come, but first off, let's see who's joining us today. Thomas Duncan, BBC Sports Scotland journalist and commentator. You all sorted for Christmas, Thomas?
Yeah, just about. Surprisingly organised this year, Amy, to be fair. Everything wrapped last night, which must be a new record, I'd have to say.
That's a bit of a show-off. And we are joined by Jamie Murphy, Ayr United, former Rangers, Motherwell, Sheffield United, Brighton, Hibs and Scotland forward as well. Jamie, are you allowed to think about Christmas yet? You've got a big game tonight.
Not quite yet, no. But obviously, you'd be silly not to prepare, especially when you've got a couple of kids like I have. So, yeah, there's a lot to do over the next couple of days.
Hitting the shops tomorrow instead of watching any football. Plenty to get through with Thomas and Jamie, but first off, let's whiz through today's Scottish football headlines. Lots of discussion this morning after the European Court of Justice said that banning clubs from joining a European Super League was unlawful. In a strongly worded statement, Aberdeen chairman Dave Cormack says the ruling will change things forever and is already talking to other like-minded clubs to ensure access to European football in the future. Celtic, though, they've ruled themselves out of any involvement in the European Super League. Back to domestic matters, thankfully, Livingston manager David Martindale has said Celtic's recent wobble is good for Scottish football, even if it makes his side's job harder this weekend as they travel to take on the champions. And it's a big night in the Championship tonight with the top two teams in action. Leaders Raith Rovers are at home to Jamie's Ayr United, while Dundee United travel to bottom team Queen's Park. I'd much rather just talk about the Championship, but let's get the European Super League stuff out the way. Thomas, why is it back in the news?
Well, it's back in the news because we had this major court ruling from the European Court of Justice, the highest court in the European Union in Luxembourg, which ruled that the way UEFA and FIFA threatened to kick clubs out of their own competitions and punish them if they broke away and joined a different competition, they ruled that was against European Union competition rules. It was an abuse of a dominant position. And no sooner was that judgment out than A22, the company who backed the original Super League a few years ago, launched a new Super League with a new format, different to what they did a couple of years ago with the 12 teams and closed shop. Their proposal is 64 men's teams, 32 women's teams as well. The men's competition would be split across 3 tiers with promotion and relegation, which they insist makes it open for other clubs to join in. So it's not a closed shop. So it's kind of started the firing gun and all that chat that reared its head a couple of years ago. And it's a significant moment, although I have to say, I think the initial reaction was, is this going to mean Super League Mark II? But most major clubs, apart from Real Madrid and Barcelona, who have always maintained their commitment to the Super League, but clubs like Man United, Chelsea, Atletico Madrid, clubs that were part of the original idea have come out and backed the existing UEFA competition. So I'm not quite sure, at least in the short to medium term, it's going to herald in the new era of the Super League. But I think it's certainly one to watch as the kind of power struggle at the top of European football only looks set to continue, and that'll probably play out through the courts over a number of years, Amy. So how exciting does that sound?
Riveting, Thomas. And that's no slight against your very comprehensive roundup there. We mentioned in the roundup Dave Cormack. There was quite a strongly worded statement or post on X, formerly Twitter, all that, sort of saying that Scottish football has sleepwalked into this. What do you reckon he means by that?
Yeah, I think what he means is particularly his own club and the clubs outside the Old Firm. I think what he's basically saying is he thinks that this is going to happen at some point, whether maybe not right now, but at some point he thinks there's going to be a new sort of European club format. Maybe it's through UEFA, maybe it's not, which will take over the Champions League, Conference League, Europa League. And I think his point is that Celtic and Rangers will probably always be part of that because they're always going to probably be the top two in Scotland, and as well as that, their fan base and brand around Europe means that they would be invited to competitions anyway. And I think what he's saying is the other clubs, Aberdeen, Hibs, Hearts, Motherwell, any other club in the top flight in Scotland may think that this battle that's playing out between Europe's elite clubs and at UEFA and through the courts has no influence on them, but actually it really does, because if you think about UEFA and the money that filters down through coefficient payments, TV market share, obviously clubs like Aberdeen getting into Europe this season made about £5 million from the Conference League group stage run alone. And there's also grassroots payments that UEFA make and stuff, and UEFA's money, the vast majority of it comes from the Champions League. And suddenly if the Champions League isn't there anymore, or is diluted, or is watered down and doesn't make as much money, that has a direct impact on how much money clubs might have in the future and what competitions they may or not play in. And I think Dave Cormack's fear is that smaller clubs in Scotland may be shut out of European football in future. So I think his point is, look, this affects everyone and we need to get our ducks in a row. We need to speak to each other. We need to have meetings. We need to try and come up with a plan, a strategy that protects and defends our interests, basically. I think that's his point. Whether you agree with him or not that this is definitely going to happen is another question, I think, altogether. But certainly I think the point remains that I don't think any club in Scotland, certainly the top flight, can ignore what's going on at the moment in European football.
Jamie, I appreciate that it's still fairly fresh. What's your initial reaction to it as a player?
That hopefully sporting integrity is upheld. I mean, that's the biggest thing for clubs like Motherwell, for example. Some of their best nights, some of the supporters will remember the European nights. They're the big ones. Even clubs like Raith Rovers, who famously went and got a couple of wins in Europe years ago. These are things that supporters of these clubs remember. So what you don't want to do is lock them out and make there no pathway for them to get into Europe. Other than that, I think it seems to be all about money. I think that's what the big thing is here, which is not really what football's about. So, we'll see what happens, but the main thing is to not block the so-called smaller clubs out of Europe.
Right, let's forget about this European Super League. Let's talk Scottish football and let's kick off with the Premiership. Tomorrow, Aberdeen go to Dundee, Ross County are at home to Hibs, and Kilmarnock host St Johnstone. Also tomorrow, it's Celtic against Livingston, as I said earlier, after back-to-back domestic defeats for the first time since 2013. Celtic really have to get 3 points here, you'd think. Why do you think, Jamie, that Celtic's form has dropped off of late?
I think there's a case from saying they're maybe a little bit too comfortable. They got that far ahead. Things were looking bleak for Rangers towards the start of the season, and Celtic seemed to be flying. And it's kind of switched on its head now. So, from a neutral at the minute to watch Scottish football, you want to see it close. Obviously, there's one team that I prefer to win, but we'll not go into that. But it'd be good for everyone to watch, and for Scottish football in general, if it's close, and it gets people tuning in, it gets people watching. Even teams like Hearts have been doing really well at the minute, coming up and getting into that third spot. So, yeah, Scottish football's looking exciting. Hopefully, it stays that way.
Here's hoping. Thomas, where do you think that Celtic need to improve to try and get some sort of buffer back in? Well, it's ultimately just trying to all build up to that game on the 30th of December against Rangers and being in the best shape, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just consistency. Brendan Rodgers has said it himself. I've been at games where they've looked really good. Second half against St Johnstone, for example, commentated on that one. I thought they were excellent. And in spells, they look like a team, like the best team in the country. But then what's different to last season is at other times they look a bit pedestrian, a bit slow, can't get their game going, and they're a bit vulnerable at the back. Obviously, they have injuries, as Rangers do as well. And I think Brendan Rodgers, again, has made clear he's not too happy with the depth of the squad, which I think is even a team like Celtic, if you miss some of your best players, obviously there's a drop off in level, so that I think has something to do with it. But yeah, I think they've just been a yard off the pace compared to what we usually see, and yeah, it's a huge game for them. You would expect them to beat Livingston at home, of course you would. I think they've lost 3 in a row in the league going back to since 1994 maybe, so you really wouldn't expect them to drop points home to Livingston, but they can't afford to drop any more before they go in to face Rangers on the 30th. So yeah, it becomes a big game for them, and obviously I think the atmosphere in the stadium wasn't the best against Hearts last week at full time. Some anger directed towards the board and things, so it's not a great time at Celtic at the moment, and the only way you change that is by basically picking up form, winning games, and obviously if they were to win the Old Firm derby before the turn of the year, that would settle things down a wee bit. But yeah, obviously got to take care of Livingston first, and Dundee as well before that.
Two of your former clubs, Jamie, Motherwell and Rangers, meet at Fir Park on Sunday. How do you see that one going?
Motherwell's form hasn't been good coming into this game. I know it's been a lot of games in the league without a victory, but Fir Park's a dangerous place to go for any team. You ask them, not a lot of people enjoy coming to Fir Park. So, it's on them to turn up and put in a good performance. I think the manager probably deserves it, how well he done last year. It's not been as good this year, and they need to pull out a performance. A club like Motherwell shouldn't really be down the bottom of the table, in my opinion. So, it's up to them to turn up at home for the supporters. But, it's obviously going to be a tough task. Rangers have been doing really well. Another win again against St Johnstone the other night, so they're in good form. But as you said, there's a few injuries, so it depends what kind of team they're able to put out.
The form under Philippe Clement has been remarkable. The rise and the consistency that Thomas was touching on that Celtic will be looking to find, they've really managed to turn that corner under Clement. What have you made of the Belgians' start? It seems crazy to still even just say a start, Jamie, but he's managed to come in already, have a trophy and get Rangers into this remarkable position in the league that even just a matter of weeks ago looked fairly unfathomable.
Yeah, he's obviously done brilliant coming in. You can see it when you listen to these interviews, when you see him on the side of the pitch giving instructions. He feels like that real authority figure. Not saying players didn't respect the previous managers before, but he's just got that something about him where you look at him and people are listening to him, and that little bit of fear factor where maybe people are a wee bit scared of him, which always helps.
Absolutely. And Thomas, Jamie sort of touched on it there, 14 games without a win now for Motherwell. Are there any positive signs that they can be turning a corner? Do you think that Stuart Kettlewell is under any sort of pressure? Jamie touched on it there, that perhaps still has credit in the bank for remarkably managing to turn their season around at the tail end of last year. I
don't know if he's under any pressure. I think any manager who goes 14 games without a win probably is. Just goes without saying. It's the way the game is these days. But I would hope that those in charge at Motherwell are looking at more than just the results. I know we always say it's a results business, but Motherwell, they've drawn 4 of their last 5 games. It's not like they've been getting beat every single week. In this game of 14 games where they've not won, I can only really pick out 2 games where they were really battered and not in it at all. And that was a 3-0 up at Ross County and the 4-2 defeat at home to Aberdeen, which 4-2 flattered Motherwell that night. But I think they've been in every game. And at the start of the run, they were unlucky to lose to Celtic and Rangers, unlucky to lose to St Mirren. It's not like they're getting blown off the park or they've been woeful every week. I do think that the performance levels have been okay. They just need something to go for them. They've shown that they're fighting for the manager. They've had a lot of comebacks, 3-3 against Ross County late on, 3-3 against Dundee late on. Having said all that, I'm not necessarily sure this is the game that they're going to turn things around, given Rangers' momentum and form. Although you wonder how far away Rangers are from fielding the kids, given the they still listed their injuries. Obviously, John Lundstrom took a sore one. That'd be a massive blow if he's out for any length of time. So I'm not sure that they'll get the result they want this time, but I do think that it's not as bad as the 14 games makes out, as absurd as that probably sounds.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
There's a huge game in the battle for third with Hearts taking on St Mirren at Tynecastle. both on 26 points. But let's move away from the Premiership and get into the Championship. Every single person on this podcast loves it. Thomas and I both paid to say it, and so is Jamie, actually. Big game tonight, Jamie, with your Ayr United side travelling to Starks Park, a very tough venue to go, taking on a high-flying Wraith Rovers. How are the squad feeling ahead of this one, Jamie?
Good, yeah. Our home form hasn't been too good, but we managed to win at home last week, which is a big positive for us. And lucky for us, our away form's actually been really good this year. So, we had a difficult game going over there on the Astro as well. So, I think everyone in the Championship enjoys a Friday night game as well. I don't know if that makes a big difference. So, yeah, the boys are definitely looking forward.
It was a tough start to the season. I remember coming down to Somerset, perhaps it was still even in August, and I really felt for Lee Bullen. I was speaking to him, he had a lot of injuries. You were one of them as well. The squad's a little bit more together now. How have things been developing? There does seem to be an upturn after a very tricky start to the season.
I think it goes without saying that we should probably have a few more points on the board, but that's just the Championship. I think all the teams are so equal. So it's a league I've obviously never played in before, but coming here I'm really enjoying it and really enjoying the fact that it's really about who is the best team on the Saturday. There's not one team that's way ahead of the other or vice versa. So I'm sure it's enjoyable for the neutrals to watch. I know some of the games on a Friday night get a lot of good viewing figures and people are talking about it a little bit more, which is only good.
How much are you enjoying life down in Ayr and in the Championship? Because it is a cracking division.
It's been great for me personally to be able to play every week again. Something that injuries and whatever have maybe took away from me for the last couple of years. So no, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Really enjoying being part of a squad again. Well, when I first went in, I was the oldest by about 5, 6, 7 years. I think McGeady helped that out a little bit, and was another one of the older ones. But enjoying passing on some knowledge to younger ones as well, which is all part of it.
Finally, there's been a lot of talk this week following Derek Adams' rant about improving the Scottish game. On that theme, David has emailed in to scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk to say, at the moment, teams won't agree to go up to 16 teams due to losing out on Old Firm gates. So an 18-team league would give each team 2 extra home games in comparison to the 16-team option. David really thought this through. Teams like Dundee United, Wraith, Inverness, Dunfermline, Partick, Ayr, Arbroath, even League One Falkirk could all be attractive additions to the top flight. So David would like to see 3 leagues of 18 teams each. Jamie, what do you make of that idea?
I'm not sure about what the structure, but I definitely think there's something to be done in terms of the leagues. I think he probably hit the nail on the head there. The reason why it's not been done is they don't want to lose the Old Firm games. But in terms of helping Scottish football, I definitely think that should be the way forward. I think in turn, you'll get more youngsters coming through because there's not as much pressure on teams that are not going to get relegated in that mid-pack. So it's something that I would think about, something that I'm sure the bigwigs behind the scenes have obviously thought about, but the Old Firm games is obviously the huge stumbling block. Well,
Mr. SPFL, if you think about it, get in touch with David. He has it all thought out. That's all we've got time for on the Scottish Football Podcast this morning. My thanks to Thomas Duncan and Jamie Murphy. And thank you for listening. Queen's Park against Dundee United will be live on Sportscene from 7:30 tonight on the BBC Scotland channel. Sportsound on BBC Radio Scotland will have full live coverage of all the weekend's games, and Sportscene will have the highlights on Saturday and Sunday evening. We're going to take a wee break here on the Scottish Football Podcast, but we'll be back with you next Thursday. In the meantime, if you haven't done so already, do subscribe and follow the Scottish Football Podcast so you don't miss an episode. Until next Thursday, from all of us here, have a very, very Merry Christmas.
Hi, it's Amy Irons here. I just wanted to tell you that Sacked in the Morning is back for a new series. We are your survival guide to football management. If you want to hear exactly what goes on in the dugouts and dressing rooms across the world, then we are the pod for you. And as ever, I'll be joined by former Scotland gaffer Craig Levine and some of football's best managers to provide all the insight you could possibly need. And you can find it on BBC Sounds. Just search for Sacked in the Morning.